Deputy Mick Wallace.
Thanks, Lachlan Corda. Ministers, I would argue that a big problem at the heart of all this is the procurement process. We have the National Paediatric Hospital Board, that we're dealing with the construction element, that we're dealing with the operations and maintenance. We found ourselves in a position now where different entities, be it BAM, the design team or others, are able to look for an awful lot of extra money, and we're really at a very early stage still. I would argue that it was available, and I would argue that it remains available. I think we can reduce the damage that is liable to be done. The board and their procurement agent, legal procurement agent, McCann Fitzgerald, they were faced with two options. Do they go for a fixed price contract or a remeasurable contract? Now, I am well aware of the fact that there is a serious obsession in government with fixed price contracts, where you depend on the capital works management framework. Now, the trouble with a fixed price contract is that it doesn't really work unless you can establish watertight scope of works. And the truth be told, that is not possible with a project of this nature. If I was building a house or an apartment, or 100 of either of them, it would be possible to do a perfectly designed scope of works, almost perfect design scope of works, because of the nature of the work. It's modular, it's repetitive, and you can measure every aspect of it, right? A hospital is different. And the truth be told, there is no such thing as a fixed price for a seriously complex engineering project. You can call it fixed price, but it isn't. And it doesn't stay so. With the Children's Hospital, the scope of works was not well defined. I would suspect that operations and maintenance mightn't have had enough input, but I don't know. But either way, it would have been just about impossible anyway to have a scope of works that was as tight as you'd like it to be running a fixed price contract. You just can't define all the parameters of the project of this nature, so a fixed price doesn't work. This project was always going to need very detailed commissioning of the various systems unique to a hospital. And commissioning is a systematic, ongoing process from pre-design stage, design stage, construction, operation and maintenance stage. You have systems that need to interact in order to have the output you're looking for. And you constantly assess whether the works carried out comply with the employer's requirement, the ER, or some people call it the works requirement. An engineering remeasurement form of contract was what was required. As bespoke civil engineering remeasurement contract.
Please, you have to listen to Deputy Wallace.
A bill of quantities is designed to it visualises the drawings into items that will make the design happen. If properly drafted, you can manage it and what it's going to cost. The contractor carries out the work, you measure it as they go, and you pay accordingly. QSs on the employer side and the contractor side, they know well what the costs are. There'll be a debate, but rarely over 5%, and you have access to arbitration. The difference is very rarely more than 5% in QSs on both sides when you're measuring as you go and paying as you go. The decision makers have approached the Children's Hospital project as if it was a regular building, which it isn't. I'm wondering where the decision making came from. I wonder why didn't McCann Fitzgerald insist that the capital works management framework was not suitable for a complex project like this. I don't know if you have the answer. Or was it a case of the HSE pushing McCann Fitzgerald aside and insisting?
Please don't. I don't want to stand accused. Please, Deputy Wallace.
I'm not making any accusations. I'm looking for answers.
Refrain from mentioning names, please.
I'm sorry. I'm wondering if the HSE were insisted on the Capital Works Management Framework, or who did. Now, I don't know whether those answers are already available. Maybe they are. And anyway, so I'll come back in.
Well, Minister or Ministers, whoever. Minister Wallace. Yeah.
I want to thank Deputy Wallace. I think he's one of the few people who can speak with authority on this subject in the House. And I want to thank him for the reasonable points that he made, which I've been noting down pretty furiously. I think the first point to make in relation to the decision makers and how did we get to this process, I think it's important to say that a National Paediatric Hospital Development Board in some construct has been in place since I think 2007. And I suppose that was a recognition by successive governments, successive ministers, that the skill set required, which is, I think, partially at the essence of your point, the skill set required to build such a specialist hospital is not retained or does not exist within a government department. So you can argue whether people got the appointments right or wrong in 2007, and many of us have served in government since then. But there were individuals. You'll get your moment in a second, Deputy Short. I'm Deputy Wallace's question at the moment. Deputy Wallace makes the point as to where the decision makers were, and I'm making the point that there has been various iterations of National Paediatric Hospital Development Boards in place since 2007, recognising that expertise was required. I don't want to use up the Deputy's time, though, in outlining why that decision was arrived at to do the two-stage process. But there was long consideration given to it, and it was recognised that there were specific benefits because of the complexity of the project. Now, you may have a different view, and you may be much better informed, Deputy. And some of the reasons were that it allowed early commencement on site, 2 years ahead of traditional procurement. It allowed market engagement with Irish and international contractors, that they had identified through this market engagement that this procurement approach would attract increased competition in a situation where, as we know, there was very limited competition at this time. Claims are addressed up front, so we're talking about a potential cost over and out before it's actually happened, so we can have the chat about how to mitigate those costs as well, that it would reduce exposure to rising inflationary pressures in the construction market, that it would provide an opportunity for the 3 contractors to interrogate detailed design, and that the programme for the main works are fully aligned across 3 contractors with a single point accountability for site management. So there was definitely a view from the procurement experts available to government, from the government's construction contracts committee and the procurement subcommittee, Deputy, that there was merit in this going. Now, what the government decided yesterday, as my colleague Minister Donoghue outlined, was that we really need to seriously interrogate this approach as we go forward on other capital projects. But there was a very solid and explicit rationale put forward back as far as 2015 that this was the right way to go. Now, I think a lot of the questions that you're asking about detailed design and the like, it's clear to me we were badly let down here somewhere, badly let down, and we need the PwC report to identify where we were.